Chapter 86, New Pursuits. Han Phoebe and Candace walked into the dirty and run-down house. It was actually very clean and neat inside with a few decorations that could even be called luxurious. To think that it was only dirty and broken down on the outside but quite fancy on the inside. After entering the house, Candace abruptly closed the door tightly, emitting a thumping sound that she was unable to conceal. Her broadsword in her hand, she barred the way out. "Candace, you don't need to be that careful. My dear uncle doesn't know any martial arts or magic. He won't be able to escape this time." Phoebe's mask had been taken off and she displayed her stunning features. She sat down leisurely at random, coldly looking at a room with its door open. Han Shao inspected his surroundings and observed by using the original demons. When he ascertained that no suspicious characters were around, he then poured a cup of warm water and took 2 greedy sips. Grover walked out of the room through the open door with a face full of dejection. He released a ghastly laugh and looked at Phoebe. "Good niece, dear niece. To think that you'd been hiding your strength all along. Was Kara already taken by you?" Phoebe started and looked in surprise at Grover. She shook her head. "No, I've only just discovered this place." "Let Kara live. I'll give you everything you want, including my life." Grover knew it would be difficult for him to escape death with the way things were now and had let everything go. "I'm sorry, Kara isn't in my hands. If my guess is correct, Grandpa Andrew sent men here already and she's been taken by them. I don't have the authority to decide whether she lives or dies." Phoebe shook her head and stared at Grover with a cold look. She asked again, "Did you kill my father?" "Yes, I poisoned him." "Since you already know everything, I have nothing further to hide." "What else do you want to know?" Grover's face was wooden as he nodded stiffly. Inhaling deeply, Han Shao could clearly feel the suppressed anger surging from Phoebe. Phoebe slowly stood up and looked at Han Shao and Candace. "I want to speak privately with my good uncle. Brian, will you guys go outside and wait for me?" Nodding, Han Shao put the teacup in his hand down and left with Candace, walking towards the alleyway entrance far away. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Candace kept sizing up Han Shao when they had left the house and finally couldn't help but ask. After a while, Han Shao had been contemplating Duke's background with a lowered head when he heard Candace's question. He raised his head and looked at her in confusion. As a girl, Candace's height was a bit taller than ordinary girls. Her skin wasn't pale but rather the copper tone of one having spent many years in the sun. Her body was quite fit and muscular and her breasts looked like they would explode out of her top. Her thighs were supple and full of explosive power. She looked as difficult to handle as a feisty mare. "What would you like to know?" Han Shao wasn't kindly disposed towards Candace, but he didn't hate her either. "How were you able to locate the assassins' movement so clearly, like you saw them all with your own eyes?" A heavy sense of curiosity permeated across her face as she looked at Han Shao with every expression of interest. "There's a magic called Eye of the Sky. You must have heard of it. My method is similar to that one. Of course there are some differences, but I can't tell you the exact details." Han Shao flicked a glance at her and said faintly, "2 archmages were unable to detect the disturbances from your method. It's wondrous indeed. Can you pass this method on to us? If our mercenary band knew of this method, it would greatly increase the success rate of our missions. We are willing to offer a hefty reward for this." "I've heard that you're a merchant. You can name your price. We can negotiate no matter how high it is. Other forms of payment will work as well as long as our mercenary band can do it." Candace looked at Han Shao with sparkling eyes and discussed very earnestly with him. Shaking his head firmly, Han Shao rejected her resolutely. "My apologies, there are something I won't sell." "My apologies, Miss Candace." "Then will you join our Battlefire mercenary band?" "As the vice captain of the band, I can directly approve your application. With your strength you will surely accomplish great deeds if you join us." Candace seemed to know that Han Shao would reject her and wasn't discouraged at all. Rather, she invited him to join them and become a member. "I'm sorry, I don't plan to for the time being." Han Shao rejected politely again. "All right, when you plan to, please remember to come find us, the Battlefire mercenary band, when you want to. I will greatly welcome you with open arms." Candace promised solemnly. Phoebe walked out of the house with a cold and remote expression at this moment. Her face only softened when she saw Candace and Han Shao. She asked, "What are you guys discussing?" "Nothing much." "Oh right, Phoebe, what about Grover?" Candace pouted a bit awkwardly as she asked Phoebe. "He killed himself just now. I've already gotten what I wanted from him. We can leave now. Phoebe's expression was strange as she looked at Candace. Then there shouldn't be anything to do with me after this. May I leave now? Han Shao suddenly spoke up when he saw the two conversing. Phoebe once again focused her beautiful eyes on Han Shao and looked dumbly at him, then said to Candace, Candace, two of your people from the mercenary band made it out. Go contact them first and see if anyone else survived in the wrecked yard. Candace looked at Phoebe and Han Shao with an ambiguous expression and displayed a smile of understanding. She nodded at Phoebe and walked off with large strides. Brian, will you take a walk with me? Phoebe blushed after seeing Candace's meaningful gaze and slowly returned to normal only after she'd left. She looked at Han Shao with a face of expectation. Sure, where would you like to go? Han Shao thought and he asked. Let's walk around the southern district. I think the Boost Merchant Guild no longer poses a threat to me anymore. Han Shao didn't say much else as he accompanied the beautiful Phoebe on a slow walk down the dirty streets. There were people who had obviously fallen on hard times on the streets and they shot admiring glances at the richly dressed Han Shao and Phoebe. In this world our guild actually doesn't have much status. Although merchants earn some gold, our status is basically the same as ordinary citizens. Phoebe's voice was far away as she said introspectively to Han Shao by her side. Miss Phoebe, you don't see the gazes of the other people on you. They're actually full of admiration and envy. To them your current life is what they dream to have. What else are you unsatisfied with? Hey, we almost died yesterday. They can't even imagine a life filled with unknown dangers. Perhaps they worry over living out their daily lives, but we worry about our lives. I wonder who admires who. Phoebe sighed self-deprecatingly. She suddenly stopped walking and concentrated her gaze on Han Shao. Brian, with your abilities you are certain to climb quite high as long as you are willing to work hard. I had thought to ask you to manage the guild with me, but I've thought through this clearly. I think the small Boost Merchant Guild would be insufficient to hold you. You should have more expansive skies. Brian, have you thought about how you should live in the future? Han Shao started as he remembered his status. Although he had left behind the label of Baron Slave, he was still a student of the academy. With his status, even if he swiftly graduated from the academy, there was still nothing to his name. Of course this wasn't the life he wanted, but just that Han Shao didn't have any other plans for the time being. Power and a lofty position is what you should be reaching for. As much money as a merchant has, he is still a small character at the mercy of others. Only those with an illustrious reputation and an extraordinary position have the right to control over and determine the lives of others. You should become one of those types of people. A mesmerizing light shone in Phoebe's beautiful eyes as she stared directly at Han Shao, her voice full of persuasion. His mind had never been so agitated before. Han Shao had thought of these things before, but never as clearly as in this moment. Since he had been lucky enough to be reborn, he should enjoy everything there was to life without reservations. Why didn't he use the strength that was available to him? Under Phoebe's persuasion, Han Shao's mindset of not wanting to remain ordinary slowly started to catch on fire and he became full of resolution. After a while, Han Shao took in a deep breath and nodded, saying lowly, I understand your meaning, but my opportunity hasn't seemed to arrive yet. A brilliant smile spreading over her face. Phoebe seemed to have been waiting for these words. When she heard Han Shao's words, she immediately stared at Han Shao and said, you're wrong, the chance has always been there. The fastest way to obtain power and status is to achieve meritorious acts in war. The Empire has never been at peace and our battles with neighboring countries has never stopped. I think a large war will break out in the near future. I think you should get involved. As your good friend, I'm willing to help you and do all that I can to help you. I appreciate your good intentions, but I would like to obtain all that I deserve through my own hands. Han Shao said resolutely to Phoebe, paused and then said again, Miss Phoebe, please prepare the rations I need. I'll come by the guild in a few days to pick them up. I think we'll have many opportunities to cooperate in the future. Then alright, I've said all that needs to be said and won't need you to accompany me further on this random stroll. I trust that with your abilities you will soon rise to prominence within the kingdom. Don't forget that I'm your friend then. Phoebe winked at Han Shao and said cutely, hey, your words today have greatly inspired me. I will remember them. Farewell, Miss Phoebe, don't forget my rations. Han Shao smiled and suddenly changed direction, heading for the northern part of the city. Phoebe pouted angrily after quite a while had passed since Han Shao had left. She said huffily in a voice that only she could hear, damn it, you only care about your rations. Chapter 87. Joining the Dark Mantle organization. After parting ways with Phoebe, Han Shao-wen returned directly to the academy. However, he once again avoided entering through the front gate and decided to enter through a secluded corner from the mountain in the back. Han Shao suddenly became wary in the woods that he had spent time with Phoebe last time, an unexplainable feeling of unease rising in his heart. This shock made Han Shao immediately release his 3 original demons. They flew out from the back of his neck and patrolled the entire woods but didn't find anything. The feeling of unease didn't vanish after the original demons failed to find anything. That exceedingly uncomfortable feeling grew stronger and stronger, making Han Shao incredibly wary. The demon slayer edge appearing in his hand, Han Shao took a deep breath and readjusted his facial expression to be at his best. He tried using his own senses to detect the abnormalities around him and called out, "Who is it? Come on out." Han Shao had only randomly called with this line and hadn't actually thought that anything would happen, because if it was an enemy at this level definitely wouldn't appear just because Han Shao had called out. But unexpectedly a low eerie laugh rang out from the thick woods as soon as he'd finished speaking. A human shape slowly took form in front of Han Shao within the shadows of the large trees. "Kid, you have a good level of awareness. How did you discover my existence?" When the figure within the shadows of the tree had materialized, a ruthless-looking old man who was exceedingly tall, skinny and wearing gray clothing walked out. The old man's beard was gray and his eyes were the color of ash. They looked completely lifeless. "Due to my instincts, who are you?" Han Shao gripped the demon slayer edge firmly and watched the approaching old man with a hostile gaze, ready to make a move at any moment. "I can give you the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm acquaintances with Phoebe's master and mean you no harm. You don't need to be so nervous." Han Shao could feel a strong sense of danger exuding from this person. This was probably the strongest person he'd met since coming to this world. Han Shao even felt that if the old man were to make a move, he'd be hard-pressed to escape. "Phoebe? So Phoebe sent you? What do you mean by all this?" Han Shao reined in his impulse to flee from this person and asked with a darkened face. The old man suddenly halted in his tracks and didn't continue forward. He just stood there sizing up Han Shao like he was observing an item he expected to sell at a high price. He kept nodding his head and a smile blossomed on his face after a while, but when this smile floated out from his ruthless features, it only made one feel that his face became even more sinister. "Phoebe doesn't know of my existence, but I know everything about your recent actions. I heard the conversation between you and Phoebe just now and have an offer to make you, but if you choose this path you can obtain all that you want, but you may also die very quickly," the old man said slowly as he looked at Han Shao. "Who are you?" Han Shao was a bit lost and had no idea what the old man wanted. He immediately asked again. "Brian. Parents died when he was young and was then sold off to the necromancy major of the Babylon Academy of Magic and forced by his uncle to become a slave. 6 years as an errand slave. Started displaying extraordinary abilities during an outing to the Dark Forest and seems to possess another wondrous way of training in addition to training necromancy magic." Han Shao's heart sank slowly as the old man started listing details from his life. Apart from a few secrets having to do with the little skeleton and the cemetery of death, most of the doings that he'd experienced in this period of time were all ferreted out. This made Han Shao feel that a pair of eyes had been fixed on him in the darkness, and a sense of fear rose in his heart. "Who are you?" This was the third time that he asked about the old man's origins. "I'm called Candide and I belong to the Empire's Dark Mantle organization that directly answers to His Majesty." Hey, there's a covert organization behind every nation. I think you understand the need for such an organization's existence. The people of Shadow Ghost have appeared in the Boost Merchant Guild several times now. You guys have caused such a great disturbance. Did you really think that we wouldn't know anything? Old man Candide looked at Han Shao with a vague smirk as he said slowly. Han Shao was greatly startled after he heard these words and heaved a silent sigh as he finally realized that he really was still too naive. He'd never heard of Dark Mantle, but immediately understood after Candide's explanation that this organization must be similar to the Western Depot and the Eastern Depot of the Ming Dynasty government agencies that directly answer to His Majesty the Emperor. Alright, what do you want from me? I'd like to absorb you into our dark mantle. I've carefully investigated your birth and think there shouldn't be a problem. I've also kept my eye on you lately and feel that your working style and special abilities will enable you to handle the jobs of Dark Mantle with competence. If you join the Dark Mantle and achieve exemplary accomplishments for the Empire, you can obtain everything you want. Candide looked at Han Shao and gave this invitation. Han Shao's brows knit together and considered it carefully. Candide's invitation wasn't as simple as it appeared on the surface, but with Han Shao's status and strength, if an enormous organization like Dark Mantle wanted to make a move against him, only death would be in his future. There was a path in front of him now, and although it was dangerous, the destination remote and full of uncertain factors, it was indeed an opportunity. This presented quite a bit of strong temptation to the now hotly ambitious Han Shao. After weighing his gains and losses, Han Shao felt that he didn't seem to have much choice. Han Shao nodded firmly after a while and said lowly, "I accept." Wonderful. Although you might be placed in more dangerous situations in the future, as long as you can climb high enough, you will have the chance to see beautiful sights that many will be unable to ever see in their lives. Candide laughed lightly and took out an iron badge, handing it to Han Shao. "This is the badge that symbolizes our status as members of the Dark Mantle. Put it away carefully. You're under my command from today onwards. Your first mission is to keep an eye out for Duke's movements." "Oh, he's the one archmage that came flying out of the house that you guys brought the members of Shadow Ghost to last night." There was a certain heft to the black iron badge with the words Dark Mantle carved on the back. There was also an image of the crown carved in back. The crown was floating above a patch of black clouds and was also black colored. "Who is Duke? Where is he now, and how should I keep an eye on his movements?" Han Shao was greatly startled and wondered how astonished Duke would be if he discovered that Han Shao was keeping surveillance on him. He might even guess that the Eye of Darkness was with Han Shao. If Han Shao were to keep tabs on Duke, then he himself would also bear greater risk. Hesitating, Candide explained, "Duke isn't a person from our Lancelot Empire. He's from the Casey Empire and is here as a representative of the Maya School of Magic from the Casey Empire. He's here to conduct an exchange of magical knowledge with your Babylon Academy of Magic and Force." Of course, these are all excuses that they've come up with. Their true goal must not be this, but they've hidden it well. We don't know what they're up to at the moment. That's why we need someone to keep an eye on them. Therefore he'll visit your academy often during this time. As a student within, you're the most convenient person to keep a watch over him. "Oh right, since you've joined Dark Mantle, no more killers from Shadow Ghost will bother you. I will tell them to behave themselves." Nodding, Han Shao said, "I see. Alright then, I'll keep an eye on Duke's movements." "How should I find you if I discover something abnormal?" "These are our 3 strongholds within the Empire. Destroy this after you look at it. This badge represents your identity and you can use it to exchange information with others in the strongholds. However, your level is too low thus far and you won't have the right to ask about many things. If you can advance to a higher status, you'll be able to use the resources of Dark Mantle and can even deploy the Empire's army." Hey, you must work hard," Candide said to Han Shao. A thin piece of paper landed in Han Shao's palm. He looked it over once and ripped it to pieces in front of Candide after he'd memorized the contents. He then said, "Alright, my mind's a mess right now and I need some time to think. I'll report to you if Duke does anything out of the ordinary. I'm going to leave now as well. The members of Dark Mantle have a lot of freedom. We won't intervene in your private affairs and will only come for you when there's a mission that needs to be conducted. We won't affect your life under normal circumstances." Candide was surrounded by a cloud of black mist and his figure became fainter and fainter. A thin pulse of magic traveled out of the mist and he then vanished from Han Shao's sight as the breeze blew past like he'd never appeared. Han Shao had clearly identified what he needed under Phoebe's persuasion not too long ago. Who would have thought that an olive branch it would be extended as soon as he'd left Phoebe? He'd joined this Dark Mantle organization after a round of discussion with Candide. This made Han Shao subtly feel that something was wrong and he started to suspect whether or not Phoebe knew of Candide's existence. This would simply be too much of a coincidence otherwise. However, Even if Phoebe and Candide were acquainted with each other, then Grover wouldn't have been anything in the face of Candide's enormous power. Phoebe wouldn't have so many troubles either. This made Han Sha-Oh quite confused as well. Han Sha-Oh carefully sorted out his thoughts within the woods and went over everything that had happened recently in his mind. He then set off towards the academy grounds again with a look of resolution. Chapter 88. But I have a guilty conscience. Han Sha-Oh had been worried that he would be found out by Duke, but had thoroughly dispelled these worries a few minutes after arriving at the necromancy major. The reason was because when Han Sha-Oh arrived, he naturally greeted Borg and Carrie when he saw them cleaning off the stone sculptures along the path. However, the two didn't recognize Han Sha-Oh and were at a loss of what to do with their profound respect and humility. When Han Sha-Oh identified himself and Borg and Carrie cautiously recognized him, they spoke to him with an even more fearful attitude. Han Sha-Oh was no longer an errand slave of the necromancy major now. He turned into a student, and his status was naturally higher than these two errand boys. Add to that the fact that the necromancy students had purposefully exaggerated Han Sha-Oh's aid when they returned from the dark forest. This made the two previous enemies, Carrie and Borg, even more afraid that Han Sha-Oh would come looking for them. However, Han Sha-Oh didn't pay attention to the two and rather took out a bronze mirror and admired himself in it, full of bliss. He'd suddenly discovered that his features had indeed gone through tumultuous changes compared to a few months ago. His originally frail and thin frame had become much stronger and taller. His weak facial features had become much more resolute after a series of life-threatening experiences. His features had become much more pronounced and had changed from those of an old child half a year ago to that of a dashing and charming young man. If even Borg and Carrie, two errand boys who were well acquainted with Han Sha-Oh, couldn't recognize him easily, then Han Sha-Oh wouldn't need to worry about Duke and Eric, particularly after Candide had promised to take care of the overhanging cloud known as Shadow Ghost. Han Sha-Oh suddenly felt completely relaxed and didn't continue to conceal his traces. He returned to the academy openly in public. "It's Brian. You haven't come back to the academy in so long. I thought something happened to you." Amy from the necromancy major had been on her way to the classroom building when she suddenly exclaimed upon seeing Han Sha-Oh. "Hello, Amy." Han Sha-Oh smiled as he greeted her and walked towards the dark major's classroom building with her. When Han Sha-Oh arrived at the necromancy major's classroom, he lost himself in thought for a little while. Just 2 short months ago he could only hold his broom and make use of the time that he had while cleaning to stand outside and listen to Jean's lectures. Who would have thought that in just a short period of time he'd turn into a necromancy major student and had the right to enter the classroom to sit down and listen to lessons with the other students? "Don't just stand there, the second class is about to begin, come on in." Amy suddenly spoke up to rush him when she walked up to the door and saw that Han Sha-Oh was standing dumbly outside the window. Han Sha-Oh immediately came to his senses and smiled kindly at Amy, nodding as he walked into the classroom. As soon as Han Sha-Oh walked in, the gazes of several students inside suddenly all focused on Han Sha-Oh, particularly Lisa in the back row. She had been lazily shutting her eyes when her eyes suddenly gleamed as she stood up and waved at Han Sha-Oh. "Here, over here." Bach and Bella's gazes upon Han Sha-Oh as well as those from some other majors were exceedingly odd as they murmured something lowly. "Brian's back. Hey, Amy, do you believe the rumors?" Athena suddenly asked Amy in a low voice after she greeted Amy. "I don't really believe it. It doesn't look like anything would ever happen between Master Fanny and Brian." "Camilla, that old witch, loves to carry tall tales. You believe stuff that she says?" Amy pouted and shook her head. It wasn't just Amy and Athena. When Han Sha-Oh walked towards Lisa, he heard all the students talk about him and Fanny. They talked vividly about Camilla finding Han Sha-Oh on Fanny's bed as if they'd personally been there. In their mouths he and Fanny became a couple caught in the act. Han Sha-Oh felt quite speechless. He hadn't thought that Camilla would be such a busybody and make it so that all the necromancy students knew of this matter. This probably meant the other teachers, including Fanny herself, had gotten the news even earlier. Lisa's originally excited expression turned into one of interrogation after Han Sha-Oh sat down with a wry smile. Her gaze first made a surprised circuit over Han Shao as if marveling over his changes. She then said coldly, "How the things they're talking about, are they true or not? Is there really something between you and Master Fanny?" "Lisa, how could even you not believe me when they don't believe me?" Exclamation mark. "If I were someone like that, Master Fanny would never be someone like that. I can't believe someone would actually believe such ridiculous things. This is too outrageous." Han Shao explained softly to Lisa with a wry expression. Lisa breathed a small sigh of relief after Han Shao's words, and her expression also eased off, but she still asked suspiciously, "Rumors don't come from nothing. It should be true that you went to Master Fanny's room in the middle of the night, right? Although the told which Camilla has a fat mouth, she wouldn't implicate you with no evidence at all." Shrugging, Han Shao said, "I only went over to ask Master Fanny a few questions. The old witch made a mountain out of a molehill, and I can't stop her from speaking. She can say whatever she likes. It doesn't affect me at all. But this has a large effect on Master Fanny's reputation. Everyone will surely think that Master Fanny's life is a bit unclean, particularly since you're her student. Perhaps the school authorities will keep an eye on her or something like that." Lisa frowned as she reminded Han Shao. Han Shao was suddenly enlightened after Lisa's words. He suddenly felt that he really was very selfish and only thinking of himself and never considering Fanny's position. Just as Han Shao was inwardly berating himself, Jean walked into the classroom with a thick stack of magic books. He swept his gaze around the room when he entered and saw Han Shao sitting in the back row. His face suddenly chilled. The class had just begun when Jean suddenly stopped and looked at Han Shao in the back with an evil smile. "Brian, you've never attended class since you became a necromancy major student. Is the knowledge I'm going over too advanced for you? Do you understand what I'm talking about?" After the trials of the Dark Forest, Han Shao understood that Jean wasn't a bad person. He just made things a bit difficult for Han Shao because of Fanny, but Jean was still a refined, cultured person. He didn't make life too obviously difficult for Han Shao, and thus, Han Shao didn't bear a grudge difficult to resolve against Jean. This time, because of those ugly rumors about him and Fanny, Jean must have been eaten alive by the green-eyed monster. This was why he was seizing upon this pretext to embarrass him. "Master Jean, I've learned the knowledge that you're going over when I read books and have mostly grasped a proper understanding. Therefore I think I can understand the class lessons. Please don't worry about me." Han Shao leaned back and said with a slight smile to Jean, "Oh, if you could grasp magic through self-study of books, then why would our Babylon Academy of Magic and Force still exist?" Hey, since this is the case, I'll ask you this. How many ways can magic be cast? They can be divided into the 4 ways. Incantations, magical items, hand seals, and magical matrices. Incantations use words to communicate with the magical elements in order to reach the purpose of release magic. Magical items include scrolls. Han Shao retained his lazy posture and smoothly reeled off a bunch of definitions, including some of his own reflections. Jean was noticeably surprised by his words. He started slightly at first and then nodded. "Very good, it looks like you already know all the basic knowledge within the books. Then I'll ask you some more questions." Jean frowned and then asked Han Shao a series of questions. He started with the most foundational magical knowledge and then started asking points that only novice mages would be able to grasp. Han Shao spoke fluidly, explaining the answers to all of these questions. Jean and the other students within the classroom all looked at Han Shao with faces full of surprise throughout this process. It seemed that they hadn't thought that Han Shao could fully grasp so much knowledge this deeply in such a short amount of time. Traces of sweat shone on Jean's forehead as he appeared a bit agitated. He then snorted lightly and asked another question. "I don't know how to answer this." Han Shao blinked and answered honestly. This question had surpassed the knowledge that a journeyman mage would know, and he truly didn't understand it. Jean finally smiled and was about to say a few words to regain face when Lisa said impatiently, "Master Jean, if he knew the answers to everything, then what would be the point of coming to your lectures?" Lisa's words stopped him in his tracks when he heard them. Jean obviously felt a bit awkward and slapped the table with a dry laugh. Alright then, I won't keep asking. Let's continue with class. How come you suddenly know so much? Lisa retracted her head as she asked Han Shao in a low voice. Didn't I tell you earlier? I asked Master Fanny about all this. Otherwise how would that old witch Camilla have material to spread rumors with? Han Shao responded and started listening to class seriously. Some of the material that Jean was currently going over included some of the journeyman mage knowledge, which was something that Han Shao still needed to grasp. This was why Han Shao didn't harbor ill feelings towards Jean's jealousy. Lisa seemed to still want to chat with Han Shao after class, but Han Shao didn't give her the chance to, as he immediately headed over to Fanny's lab after class. Fitch, I've already explained this magic many times. I think with your powers of comprehension you should have understood this long ago. Why can you still not successfully cast it? Han Shao's sensitive ears allowed him to clearly hear the conversation inside as he stood outside the laboratory doors. Master Fanny, I think you're well aware of my feelings, but why don't you give me any chances and would rather be with that lowly errand slave? Why? Fitch's strong complaints traveled out from inside. Han Shao pulled the door open slightly and could clearly see Fitch's furious face. Master Fanny wore black-rimmed glasses and an Amir regulation-style magic robe. A look of resignation appeared on her face as she sighed. Fitch, I've become more and more disappointed in you. First of all, Brian is the same as you now, one of my students. You shouldn't treat him as an errand slave anymore. In addition, I've noticed that you've never focused your concentration whenever you come to me with a question. You're always distracted and I have no idea what you're thinking of. Brian is much better than you when it comes to stuff like this. Brian again? In what way is that damned errand slave better than me? Why are you willing to be with him but unwilling to give me any chances? Is the witch Camilla really speaking the truth and you really did sleep with him with no sense of shame? The fury on Fitch's face grew as he suppressed his voice, almost roaring as he spoke. Pa! Fanny flung a slap at Fitch. She was truly incensed, an uncommon occurrence. She looked at Fitch with cold eyes and said, I think I have nothing further to say to you. I told you before that we could only talk about matters of the heart once you'd advanced to the level of adept mage in order to encourage you, but now I see that not everything is alright with you. I can tell you clearly that there is no possibility of anything developing between us. I hope you can let go of all illusions. If you still have questions regarding magic in the future, please come find me within the training fields or the classroom. You are no longer welcome in my laboratory. Please leave immediately. So you've been lying to me all along. Ha ha. Good, very good. You wanted me to reach the level of adept mage first before discussing matters of the heart, but the errand slave Brian has already become an exception for you. Hypocritical, shameless woman, I'll never believe you again. Fitch held his face as he laughed ghastly. Walking outside of the laboratory, Han Shao backed up a few steps and hid himself in the corner until Fitch had left. He looked coldly at Fitch's passing figure, paused for a moment and then walked into Fanny's laboratory with a natural expression. Han Shao saw that Fanny was a bit lost in thought as he walked towards her. She propped herself up listlessly on the round table with her two hands, sighing lightly with a lowered head. She murmured to herself with an exceedingly weak voice, perhaps Fitch is right. I really am a hypocritical, shameless woman. I seem to have truly violated some principles. Han Shao clearly heard all of Fanny's low murmurs, but he didn't understand the meaning behind her words and didn't know who her words were intended for. After thinking for a while, Han Shao cocked a finger and rapped on the surface of the round table. Get out of here. Fanny suddenly lifted her hand and glared at Han Shao. When she saw that the person in front of her had turned into Han Shao, her expression became very odd. She first blinked and then started in shock. Her eyes seemed like they wanted to hide something. Her expression finally went back to normal and she rolled her eyes, obviously in a bad temper, at Han Shao. What are you doing here? Nothing much, I just have a few questions to ask you. Han Shao looked oddly at Fanny and responded, what did you hear? Did you see everything just now? Fanny's charming features changed as she suddenly glared at Han Shao. Your ears are so perverse that you must have heard everything. Don't you know that eavesdropping is very rude? I didn't want to listen in, but they all landed in my ears. I didn't have any choice either. Han Sha-oh spread out his hands like a rascal, indicating that he really hadn't meant to. His expression then turned grave as he turned to Fanny and said seriously that Camilla really is very evil. I don't mind, but she's slandered you and negatively impacted your reputation. Do you intend to let her off the hook like this? Forgot it, the old witch is just like that. There's nothing between us anyways. What other people say have nothing to do with us. The more we explain, the more they'll think we have a guilty conscience. Let's just ignore them, since people of moral integrity do not fear slanderous attacks. Fanny sighed lowly as she too seemed a bit worried, but spoke peacemaking words. But I have a guilty conscience, Han Sha-oh said with a wry expression. Damn it, what do you feel guilty about? Fanny's charming face blushed hotly all of a sudden, but her expression was infuriated as she lowered her head and cursed lowly at Han Sha-oh. It's because of my mistake that's caused other people to misunderstand you, so I feel that I have wronged you, and so of course I feel guilty, Han Sha-oh explained with a poker face. Fanny started slightly and then reacted afterwards, saying huffily, so this is what you meant by guilty conscience. I thought you meant something else. What other meaning is there? Han Sha-oh asked. No, nothing, Fanny hastily responded, like she wanted to cover something up, and then immediately changed the topic and asked Han Sha-oh, what questions do you have for me this time? Han Sha-oh had been about to open his mouth to answer when he suddenly felt someone approaching. He didn't respond and looked to the door instead. After a while, Han Sha-oh saw the Wind Archmage Duke walk into Fanny's room with a benevolent smile. Master Fanny, are you free today? I'd like to ask you a few more questions. Duke smiled and greeted Fanny after entering the room. His brow then furrowed as he turned to look at Han Sha-oh. Han Sha-oh was startled but kept a very normal expression on his face, looking at Duke with an expression of surprise and confusion, like it was the first time he'd seen Duke, and wanted to know about his origins and background. Chapter 89. An odd phenomenon in the molded spirit realm. Mr. Duke, you're too polite. Go ahead and ask whatever you'd like to know. Fanny passed a chair to Duke and smiled faintly. Duke glanced over Han Sha-oh's body and then naturally looked back at Fanny as if not minding Han Sha-oh at all. He didn't take the chair that Fanny passed over and only said politely, I won't be sitting, I'm just here to ask you a small question. I'll leave after I've asked it. Master Fanny, you've studied necromancy magic all this time. Have you ever heard of the Eye of Darkness? On the side, Han Sha-oh silently observed Duke and noticed that after he said these words his gaze was tightly fixed on Fanny, as if was trying to glean some clues from Fanny's facial expression. Shaking her head, Fanny's expression was perplexed as she asked Duke instead, what is this Eye of Darkness? Does it have something to do with a necromancy major? Hey, it's just a small tool. I'm not too certain of the specifics either, that's why I wanted to ask you. Since you don't know as well, forget about it. My apologies for disturbing you. Duke wore a gentle smile, having delivered this line after entering through the door. He nodded towards Fanny and walked towards the door again. When he reached the door, he seemed to suddenly thought of something again and asked carelessly, oh right, Master Fanny, I've heard that the library of your necromancy major is shared with the dark majors. The necromancy major was once greater than the dark major many years ago. Do you not have your own standalone library? Hey Mr. Duke, you've said so yourself that it was many years ago when the necromancy major was at its peak. The magics that necromancers can now grasp are limited and there aren't that many books on display. Fanny laughed lightly and then paused. She said indifferently, oh right, I've heard that there's a secret library within our school. There are forbidden texts from all the various majors within that library, preserved secretly with authorization from the Empire. I've only heard about it from one of the other teachers and have never known where this secret library was hidden. I see, then I'll be taking my leave. I'll be taking up residence within your academy for the immediate future. May I inconvenience you with any other questions I may have? I'll be happy to be of service. It looked like Duke hadn't recognized Han Sha-oh. The former hadn't paid any attention to Han Sha-oh after his initial glance when he walked into room. Han Sha-oh rejoiced inwardly after Duke left. Alright, what questions do you have? Fanny flicked a glance at Han Sha-oh after Duke left and asked with ill temper. His space ring lit up faintly. Han Sha-oh brought out the questions that he'd previously organized. He sat down naturally in the chair that Duke hadn't occupied just now and started with his first question. As an adept necromancer, Fanny had a very complete grasp of theoretical knowledge. Questions that had troubled Han Shao for quite some time were all easily resolved through Fanny's explanations. Summoning zombies is a bit more troublesome than skeletons because the volume and weight of zombies are greater. You'll need to expend more mental strength when summoning them. In addition to this, controlling zombies is also more complicated than skeletons. The bodies of zombies are much more durable than skeletons. If you wish to agilely control them, you must practice repeatedly. Fanny's voice was gentle as she concentrated on pointing out a few things to take note of when summoning zombies. When Fanny finished explaining, Han Shao's brow knit fiercely together as he sank into a state of contemplation. Fanny didn't make a sound as to not disturb Han Shao when she saw that he was deep in thought. After a while, Han Shao exhaled easily and smiled. So it was an issue of insufficient coordination between the deployment and retrievement of mental strength. I've grown accustomed to summoning skeletons and am used to using the same amount of strength to communicate across the other dimension. It looks like this was the core of the problem. I think I understand now. After those words, Han Shao started reciting the incantation to summon zombies again within Fanny's vision. When the first incantation finished, the figure of a zombie flashed through the air and then immediately disappeared. Han Shao wasn't in a hurry as he tried to control the amount of his mental strength, but still hadn't succeeded after 4 or 5 tries. Fanny's face wore a gratified smile as she watched Han Shao. She understood that Han Shao had already understood the meaning of her words and was searching for the appropriate amount of mental strength through practice. Once he felt the proper amount of mental strength, he would be able to completely summon a zombie. Never mind, you don't need to practice for now. Your direction is definitely correct and you just lack a bit of repeated practice. I think you'll be able to fully grasp the magic of summoning zombies when you are able to fully control your mental strength. Brian, it's only been 2 or 3 months yet you've already reached the level of novice mage. I've never heard of such speed in all my years of teaching in the necromancy major. Then how do I compare to Fitch? Han Shao temporarily gave up further practice beneath Fanny's encouragement and chuckled honestly as he looked at her. It feels so unnatural to see your honestly smiling face. Don't act dumb in front of me anymore. Oh, I'd forgotten about Fitch until you mentioned him. He seems very off right now. I'm worried that he'll hold a grudge and purposely create trouble for you. Be careful. Fanny first rebuked Han Shao and then spoke to him with a tone of concern. Don't worry if Fitch is really that gullible. I think the person who would end up worse off will surely be him. Han Shao shrugged his shoulders and paid Fitch's grudge no mind. To be honest, he really didn't think much of the journeyman mage Fitch now. Brian, I knew that you'd be here. Come here. Master Fanny, I have a few matters to discuss with him. He. Lisa's voice traveled in from outside at this moment as she walked toward Han Shao. As soon as she came in, she grabbed Han Shao's wrist and dragged him outside. As Fanny watched Han Shao get pulled away by Lisa, a bit of anger seemed to grow out of nowhere in her heart. It was as if someone had seized something precious to her and she didn't feel quite happy about it. How do you know my cousin? Lisa asked as she dragged Han Shao to a little courtyard behind the school library. Han Shao liberated his shoulder from Lisa's hand and looked at her in confusion. Your cousin? Who is he? Lawrence. He's learning martial arts in our martial arts school. He came looking for you previously, but you weren't here. Who would have thought that he'd immediately come looking for you as soon as you'd returned this time? How do you know him? So it was him. This Lawrence was a bit odd. He had the same master as Phoebe but attended class at the academy. Also, he currently possessed the strength of a journeyman swordsman. Han Shao weighed all of this privately. As he lowered his head, Han Shao happened to see Lisa's chest next to him. Her chest had originally been quite flat but now blossomed into shapely curves. The well-rounded look noticeably illustrated that she had quite a figure. Lisa, are you wearing more clothes than usual today? Why do I get the feeling that you've filled out quite nicely? Han Shao snuck a glance at Lisa's chest and unknowingly let these words slip. What do you mean by that? Lisa had been walking when she heard Han Shao's words. She was so startled that she almost fell over. Her little face then reddened as she stared at Han Shao. Han-Sha-Oh with her question. Your chest was flat before with nothing there, but now it looks bumpy. Did you pat it with something? Han-Sha-Oh thought internally, but his words were directly reflected in his speech. He opened his mouth and responded with this incredibly honest internal dialogue. Extraordinary rage. Lisa glared vehemently at Han-Sha-Oh and reached out her small hand and gave Han-Sha-Oh a firm pinch. She gritted her teeth and said, you said such a thing and now suspect that I've patted my chest. Do you want to die? Han-Sha-Oh was horrified as he suddenly realized what he said. He thought those words had only stayed in his heart just now, and according to his modus operandi he would have only kept them in his heart. He would never have caused so much trouble for himself by voicing thoughts that would only anger the other person. But who could have known that reality would be so strange? It was his inner thoughts, but Han-Sha-Oh hadn't given any thought to the consequences and just let it all out. This made Han-Sha-Oh feel exceedingly odd. At the same time, a strand of cool sensations suddenly suffused with his mind. Han-Sha-Oh's body shuddered slightly, and he then understood why such words slipped out from him before. It must be because the magical yuan had started creating some strange phenomenon after entering the molded spirit stage. He smiled wryly at Lisa with her teeth gritted as he calmed himself down inside. He privately admonished himself to be careful and to not say anything random again. He finally laughed dryly at Lisa. I'm sorry Lisa, I was just joking with you. I hadn't thought that you really started developing. I'm truly happy for you. You're such a bad person to say such things to someone. Lisa immediately blushed and explained in a low voice, I should be the one thanking you instead. I followed the methods that you prescribed. This is so embarrassing. Anyways, that's what happened. Shaking his head in silent laughter, Han-Sha-Oh had completely forgotten the ways he'd imparted onto Lisa before for developing her breasts. Who would have thought that they would actually have an effect? This made Han-Sha-Oh feel rather awkward and put on the spot. Hi Brian, how are you? At this moment Lawrence happened to see Han-Sha-Oh and Lisa from across the courtyard and greeted them from afar. Lisa hastily took in a few breaths to calm her reddened face and snuck a glance at Han-Sha-Oh, saying softly, Lawrence's father is a great finance minister of the empire. He is on very friendly terms with His Majesty. It will benefit you greatly if you have increased contact with him. I won't be disturbing you then. Lisa seemed to be greatly afraid of Lawrence, seeing her reddened face, and after saying these words she fled towards the training fields with small running steps. The son of one of the empire's finance ministers, Han-Sha-Oh gave a slight start as he thought privately that the academy was indeed full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It would seem that many future nobles would be training in the various majors of the academy. I'm quite good. I've heard that you came looking for me twice. Hey, were you planning on spending 5 gold coins for me to get beaten by you all day? There wasn't only Han-Sha-Oh and Lawrence in the courtyard, there was also a few students from other majors in the distance reading books in groups of 2 or 3 or leisurely tanning themselves in the sunlight. If you're willing to, I don't mind spending another 5 gold coins. Hey, but I think you would definitely not be willing now. Lawrence leaned against a stone railing and was quite at ease as he spoke to Han-Shu. Who says I'm not willing? The only thing is I don't need 5 gold coins. As long as you're willing to let me fight back, I'm agreed to practicing with you. I was beaten up quite severely by you last time and really want to save face. Han-Sha-Oh smiled faintly and also leaned leisurely against the railing as he spoke to Lawrence with an interested expression. Oh, that's not a problem. I can practice with you after we've concluded our business here and see if you're really as strong as Phoebe says. Lawrence also looked quite interested as he stood up straight and smiled. Alright then, I'd like to hear what business you have with me. The two of us shouldn't have any interaction at all, so what have you come to discuss with me? Looking around, Lawrence kept his voice down when he discovered that no one was paying them any attention. He looked at Han-Sha-Oh with bright eyes. My little junior sister said that you seem to be able to get your hands on black iron ore. If this is truly the case, I'd like to purchase some from you. It doesn't have to be much, just an amount at the size of a fist will do. I was going to ask little junior sister to buy some for me, but I felt that since we got to know each other last time and I'm truly curious about you, I'd like to be friends, so I've come to find you myself. Han-Sha-Oh looked at the very sincere Lawrence and thought that since he was the son of a great finance minister for the empire, he must have a lot of money. Chapter 93 3 pairs of eyes in the darkness. I can get the black iron ore for you, yes, but you also know that it's not that easy to obtain. How many gold coins do you intend on spending to buy it? Han Shao weighed things up internally as he spoke slowly with a calm expression. His mental state sharpening, Lawrence drew himself upright and said with some excitement, so you can get it. Hey, I only need the size of a fist to forge weapons. The black market currently has a shortage, so name your price. Rubbing his chin, Han Shao remembered a conversation he had with Phoebe last time and hesitated, saying faintly, how about this? Give me 5,000 gold coins and I'll try to get a piece for you. No problem, although black gold ore is even more rare. A black iron ore the size of a fist is indeed worth 5,000 gold coins. If you can get a piece of black iron ore, you can come find me at the night school. We'll do an exchange of goods and money, Lawrence said joyfully. Nodding, Han Shao remembered how he'd been beaten up by Lawrence a few months ago at the night school. His eyebrow flicked upwards as he chuckled. I'll get you a piece of black iron ore within 10 days. Why don't you practice with me again right now? I'll be very happy to be a human target for you again. Alright then, let's begin. I can check out just how wonderful you are. Even someone as proud and aloof as Phoebe continuously complimented you in front of me. I'm quite curious about your strength. Lawrence struck a pose excitedly and was prepared to immediately fight with Han Shao. It was noon and most of the students in the courtyard had just put their things away and were getting ready to go to lunch. Only 2 or 3 students sunbathing in the far distance seemingly hadn't left because they'd fallen asleep. Han Shao swept a glance around the perimeter and smiled. Let's go to the left. There aren't that many people there and we won't affect anyone. Han Shao lifted his head provocatively at Lawrence after he spoke and walked to an empty clearing behind the railing to the left. Lawrence tightened his fists and chuckled lightly, following behind Han Shao and also making for the empty lot on the left. When he arrived, Han Shao circulated the magical yuan throughout his body and started adjusting his bodily condition. Lawrence was a few steps behind Han Shao and had just walked down the stone steps when Han Shao had already doubled back like lightning, bringing a fist crashing down on Lawrence without giving him time to react. Lawrence hadn't anticipated that Han Shao would make a move so quickly. The punch with frightening momentum had already arrived in front of Lawrence before he'd had time to react. His facial expression changing slightly, Lawrence suddenly backed up a step after putting his feet down, returning to the stone steps again, and shunted his body to the side, avoiding the punch that Han Shao had suddenly flung his way. The punch whistled past Lawrence's face and frigid air emanated from Han Shao's left fist, giving Lawrence a bit of a fright. Han Shao retracted his left arm before Lawrence had time to react, then suddenly curved it and slammed his elbow into Lawrence's chest. Lawrence grunted lowly as his body was forced into the railing by Han Shao's elbow, his face reddening slightly. Hey Lawrence, your sense of alertness isn't good enough. Han Shao didn't follow up his elbow blow to Lawrence's chest with another attack. He backed away with an odd smile, instead teasing Lawrence in a sing-song tone. The two of them were only practicing and not fighting to the death, so Han Shao hadn't used his full strength in that strike. He'd only released the barest hint of frigid air from the glacial mystical spell fire. As a sergeant knight, Lawrence had fighting aura protecting him internally and hadn't suffered any injuries. You were the one who suddenly ambushed me. This punch doesn't count. I'll make you pay later. Lawrence wasn't mad as he elaborated on the truth with a wry expression. He then walked down the stone steps again and suddenly faced Han Shao with no hints of levity. Pale green fighting aura suddenly blossomed from Lawrence's hands as his footsteps sped up. He approached Han Shao like lightning. The fighting aura from his left hand suddenly formed into the shape of a sword of light and hurtled down towards Han Shao. Lawrence had just experienced Han Shao's speed and strength and understood that the current Han Shao couldn't be compared with who he had been before. This was why he was using his fighting aura, but his movements were quite cautious as he obviously pulled his punches. A trace of a slight smile curved at Han Shao's lips as he watched Lawrence's movements. He measured up the strength of Lawrence's fighting aura and completely failed to dodge. He circulated the glacial mystical spell fire in his right hand as a thin beam of faint red light materialized in the path of Han Shao's waving right fist. It crashed down into the sword of light coalesced from Lawrence's fighting aura along with Han Shao's right fist. Bam sounded out dully as Lawrence's sword of light made from fighting aura dispersed in a mass of light spots. Lawrence's strong forward momentum was halted in its tracks. Han Shao also felt a wave of soreness and numbness overcome his right hand as his body backed up 2 steps involuntarily. Lawrence, how much of your fighting or did you use in coalescing your sword of light just now? Han Shao looked at Lawrence with burning eyes as he asked. 60%. Lawrence responded and then looked askance at Han Shao. Your speed and aura is noticeably different compared to a few months ago. It looks like you were definitely acting on purpose last time. Except why would you be willing to be beaten up for 5 gold coins? Han Shao had been a rookie who hadn't been tried in combat a few months ago, and his magical yuan had only been at the first level of the solid realm. He had done so to earn gold coins, but most importantly to train his body, and thus hadn't held himself back. It looked like Lawrence was misunderstanding Han Shao. 60% of his fighting aura. Han Shao thought briefly and went over the amount of magical yuan he had infused just now. He finally concluded that his own strength should be slightly stronger than Lawrence's because he had only infused his punch with about 40% of his magical yuan. This already had the effect of being at equal strengths with his opponent. After testing his strength through the direct collision of one fist, Han Shao didn't continue colliding head-on with Lawrence. He used the agility and nimbleness of his body instead to battle Lawrence in much more efficient ways. The two of them traded blows back and forth for a while on the empty lot, and both of them suffered from a few attacks. Han Shao's body was obviously much stronger than Lawrence's, and he emitted low grunts when punches of equal strength landed on his body. Han Shao's body was stronger than Lawrence's to begin with, not to mention that the initial stage of training magical yuan had been self-inflicted torture, so he had endured all sorts of pain. He was already used to this kind of pain, so these blows didn't even register on his body when they landed. Spots were dancing in Lawrence's eyes when he voluntarily stopped after a while. He smiled wryly. No more. Enough. You're quite a strange person. I can't feel any fighting aura from you at all, but why is it that your strength is much greater than mine? Is your body made out of steel? Why does it feel like I'm punching a stone wall when I hit you? Don't you feel pain at all? Chuckling evilly, Han Shao said, don't you worry about this. My body is naturally odd. Can't my body be strong? Do you have the blood of barbarians running through you, or can you go berserk like the berserk warriors? Phoebe was right, you are a marvelous person. Lawrence first asked in astonishment and then murmured to himself. Han Shao also understood his deficiencies after the two had sparred. His body and magical yuan was indeed wondrous, but Lawrence had obviously been trained in martial arts, and there was quite a rhythm in his punches and evasive maneuvers. Han Shao had never learned martial arts, and his attacks were always the simplest methods. Compared to Lawrence, he lacked effective attacking methods. He made a mental note of this deficiency. Han Shao planned on thoroughly pondering this when he had time and see if there were any other attacking styles left behind in Chu Kanglan's memories. I don't know. Alright, let's stop here for today. I finally redeemed myself for last time. I'll come to the night school when I obtain the black iron ore. Han Shao mentally weighed a few things and made his careless farewells to Lawrence as he returned to the necromancy major with furrowed brows. Lawrence didn't get mad after coming off a bit worse for the wear this time. After he bid farewell to Han Shao with a smile, he walked towards his night school and muttered, a strange person indeed. The durability of his body can probably be compared with orc warriors. Han Shao mused privately as his footsteps continued to take him towards the necromancy major. Phoebe needed some time to prepare the rations, and he didn't intend on returning to the cemetery of death in the short terms. Duke was currently residing within the school, and Han Shao still didn't know his exact plans. Therefore he decided to remain within the necromancy major after some thought. Han Shao's dorms had long since been arranged by Fanny, but he'd never lived in them. Now that he'd decided on temporarily staying within the academy, the dorms were finally proving to be of some use to him. The Babylon Academy of Magic and Force was the largest institution of learning within the empire. Its facilities were very comprehensive, and it was no wonder that a high tuition was enacted from every student. Han Shao's quarters were in the corner of the second floor and were roughly 50 to 60 meters squared. It included a bedroom and a bathroom with tables, chairs and mirrors. It was the difference between heaven and earth compared to the warehouse Han Shao had stayed in before. It was already past noon after he'd arrived at his dorms. Han Shao had missed mealtime and could only take out a few chunks of meat jerky from his space ring to pad his stomach. Han Shao didn't leave the dorms after he finished eating. He closed the room door tightly and sat on the bed, taking advantage of a quiet lull to practice his magical yuan. The magical yuan started circulating and slowly began to coalesce in his mind from all parts of his body. A sort of clear, slightly cool feeling permeated through his brain, making Han Shao feel that his brain was immersed in a refreshing pool of water. However, this feeling only lasted for a short while. The comfort of his mind was replaced by a soul-wrenching pain. The training of the molded spirit level caused Han Shao's brain to continuously switch between comfort and pain. He would feel lazily at ease one second and so much pain that it felt like someone was digging through his brain with a sharp knife the next. What was most agonizing about this for Han Shao was that every time the pain surged, his mind would become immensely clear-headed. This would cause the pain to be suddenly magnified 10 times. The clarity of his mind was specifically for him to suffer through even greater pain. This made Han Shao wish to curse whoever created this magical yuan technique. Was seriously a perverse masochist. After a long time, Han Shao breathed out lightly and halted his magical yuan training. Hot air rose from his body like he'd just taken a hot shower, and a strong sense of manliness rolled off his body. Training his magical yuan had taken Han Shao from afternoon directly to night. The night scenery outside his window was captivating as the cool night breeze blew in. It was desolate and silent all around. Sitting up from his cross-legged position, Han Shao turned on the hot water in the bathroom and laid back leisurely in the tub, enjoying this rare moment of carefree ease. He even hummed a small tune. The dead of the night was the perfect timing for those with ulterior motives to come skulk around. Two small sounds suddenly sounded in Han Shao's ears just as he was lazily showering. One of them came from within the dormitory building, the other outside the window. 3 original demons flew out without a sound from the back of Han Shao's neck. 2 of them went out the window to check what was going on outside. One of them floated towards the origin of the sound, while the other stayed near the window silently observing any abnormalities. The last original demon floated out the crack in the door and arrived in the hallway of the dormitory building, moving forward along the hallway and floating to where the sound had come from. The one that had gone outside finally discovered Duke surreptitiously floating around the sides of the buildings after traveling for a while. Duke hadn't used Nighthawker clothes this time. He appeared like a ghost in the darkness, floating to the Dark Major's classroom buildings without any weight at all. The original demon within the hallway had discovered one of the dormitory room doors had been lightly opened, with Fitch tiptoeing out quietly with a sinister face. He was walking toward Han Shao and, judging from his facial expressions, seemed to bear ill will. Han Shao immediately jumped out from the bathtub and quickly towed himself off. He put his pants back on and lay down on the bed with his back facing the door, even breathing sounds emitting from his mouth.